is one. Yeah, there is one. She's a badass lady that can get things done. She's the blood sister and she's one tough nun. And if you think you can take her, I'll say hell no, 'cause there ain't no man can beat Catholic Aikido. Yeah, there is one. There is one tough nun. She's in the habit for revenge. A penguin that'll peck your eyes out clean. She's gonna crack her ruler across the knuckles of this town, 'cause the Holy Spirit's made her twice as mean. Yeah, she's one tough nun. Matty, he was a little boy who did what he was told. Took care of his little brother, and his dad was mighty cold. Mighty cold, he was wrong. He never warmed his finger when he greased him up with lube. And he never did forget his dad would fill and stuff his tiny tube. Ugh, God. And there was one. There is one tough bum, those cheeks have scarred to hardened steel. And you can rent it for an hour for some green. Watched his dad explode, and blood's a less offensive mode than the kind that he had come to find routine. Right on his tough one, bum, 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 bum. Yeah, Matty, yeah, he had one tough bum. Well, that was pretty goddamn rough. Look alive, sunshine. Hey guys, this is Jesse Dram, and you are listening to the I Hate Infinite Jest podcast, episode 24, pages 682 to 716. Our guest this week is Jeff Anderson. He is a super fan of the book, read it about 6 times. He's also a former college DJ. I specifically wanted to talk to him about some of the Madame Psychosis stuff. You can find him at Tall Hefe on all the things. Be sure to check out my episode from the other day with my good friend Rusty Wright of the Sweet Heat podcast. That is footnote number 3. We discuss Big Red Sun, David Foster Wallace's 98 venture to the 98 AVN Awards. I'm being really sloppy this week. Hope you don't mind, guys. That was a long episode. It was good, but I gotta roll, so I'm trying to get some stuff out there. This week we talk about cool stuff. We somehow talk about new metal a lot. We talk about the importance of literary moms and how important it is that they get us into reading at a young age. We also talk about the different nicknames for genitals between men and women. That's a meaty mouthful of an episode. So go check it out. Share, like, subscribe. Tell people about us. We only got 10 episodes left before we make our big conversion into whatever this is going to be. I haven't quite decided yet. Follow me at Mr. Jessico on YouTube. Diamond Joe Quim on Reddit. Wasn't trying to be dirty, just ran out of letters. At Jesse Dram on all the other things. Send me a message at jessedram.com. Check out specifically my YouTube and my Instagram this week. I did some comedy over the weekend. The video is not great, but the audio is good. And, here, see if you like me as just a comic and not a guy pooping on a book that you like so much. It also looks like I have a show November 14th, 16th? I don't know. I'll look into that, but it's going to be Cricket Comedy. That'll be at Workhorse Brewing in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. If you guys want to come out and see me tell some jokey jokes, that'd be a good time to do it if you are in the Eastern Pennsylvania area. If you're not, King of Prussia sounds like a weird place for a city, but no, you have to go there and pledge a loyalty to the actual King of Prussia. I think his name's Larry. Larry of Prussia. But yeah, really cool place. So that's me. That's this episode. At Jesse Dram at all the things. At Tall Hefe for this guys. Listen to the Sweet Heat podcast featuring Rusty Wright and Jeff Colella. Guys, I am going to go visit my mother-in-law in Princeton. Hell yeah. If you're ever in Princeton, go to Olives. They make incredible hummus, and we're going to go get it. All right, that's this week's episode. Bye. In a world of drugs and violence, where the streets are cold and cruel, where an honest man... right, guys, here we are. I Hate Infinite Jest, episode 24. Train kept a rolling. We are on pages 682 to 716. Our guest this week, Mr. Jeff Anderson. How are you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Jesse?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm a little more hungover than most episodes. But that happens. I somehow ended up at like I ended up in a very conservative part of Pennsylvania last night doing stand-up. And I told nothing but anti-Trump jokes, and I got them to like me somehow. So I feel pretty good. I am hungover with acceptance.
That's a pretty good it's a pretty good Saturday.
Yeah, that's about as good as it gets. All right, so Jeff, tell us who you are, what you do, where we can find you online, if that's something you would like to be found for.
My name's Jeff. I'm just an Infinite Jest fan who's been listening to the show. It can be found online at Tall Hefe on Twitter, and that is about it. That's TALLJEFE.
All right, now you got to tell me there must be some kind of origin of Tall Hefe.
Well, I'm 6'4", and in middle school when we're in Spanish class with the name Jeff, you just get called Hefe a whole bunch.
There you go. I was gonna say I wouldn't have pegged you as 6'4" right up. Well, first I wouldn't have pegged you just to be polite, but I would say the Zoom doesn't really give that height thing. It's fun. I have a cousin of mine. He has a friend named Shemp, and I remember like just recently, like why do you guys call him that anyway? Like, oh, because we were in marching band together, and his name was Jason, but there were already two other Jasons, so we just called him Shemp. And somehow that lifelong, like one of my brother's friends is still named Taco, based on like a kindergarten nickname that just somebody gave him.
And it's funny. I mean, I think actually Infinite Jest kind of highlights the fact that sometimes nicknames, like you can't give them to yourself, and sometimes they just the origin story is kind of boring.
Oh yeah. So didn't you tell me that you were like a former radio DJ as well?
Yeah, if I'm being self-aggrandizing, I used to volunteer for a local radio station here in Colorado, KDNK, where they really will allow anybody in the booth to play whatever the hell they want. So,
I mean, honestly, when you're young, that just sounds like the best thing in the world, though. Like, yeah, I just get to I get to play anything I want, and people, they don't have to listen, but like if their radio dial's stuck on this, then yes, they do have to listen to me.
Yeah. And if you're willing to stay up past 10 p.m. and do some of those late night shifts, you actually don't even have to deal with the FCC regulations. You can just kind of let loose.
Nice. Well, see, that's what I actually wanted to get to a little bit, and it made me interested to have you on. For whatever reason, the entire concept of Madame Psychosis really doesn't. I never got it. I never understood it, and I have a passing interest in radio. I have a friend who is a professional DJ out in Wisconsin on one of the 47 KISS FMs that exist in the country.
Yep.
But what did you think of the entire idea of Madame Psychosis? Just coming from even a novice radio background, because to me it's like I couldn't imagine anything like that being on the air. What was your take?
It's interesting. I think Madame Psychosis is sort of like I've heard on this show, and I've thought of it in relation to Infinite Jest. Like this is sort of like a South Park cartoony send up, and I would almost see Madame Psychosis as shit, like a really terrible talk radio host, but almost so terrible that it's compelling. Like there's a mention, and I don't know if it's happened yet, where they talk about some of her dark periods of like just reading Bret Easton Ellis on air. Like it was like 3 straight weeks. Okay, sorry, spoiler alert.
No, that's why I'm actually, well, I'm a little intrigued. I had no idea we actually got into Bret Easton Ellis, knowing that him and David Foster Wallace were not the best of chums.
Yeah, and I think it was sort of like he puts Ellis in, Joel's voice just to make it highlights how how grim it was.
Mhm.
And and like overall, yeah, they had this like in real life feud about you know what kind of earnestness and irony should be in literature, and what constitutes good literature.
Mhm.
And I think that was a vehicle in the book for him to just again go kind of cartoony and send a little jab
Mhm.
to one of his quote unquote rivals way.
Okay. See, I have no idea how many artists we have listening to this particular show, but I can tell you, as somebody who's been, obviously you're listening to a podcast I'm creating, so at least on that level I am an artist. But really just how hard the temptation is to like not settle scores and insult your enemies at every I remember I worked on an independent film, and me and the director and the star were recording a commentary track. And we just got really drunk doing it. And halfway through, I'm like yelling about old girlfriends from back in the day. And like, you thought I wasn't good enough. Listen to me now. It is really hard to not show your ass once you feel you have anybody ready to listen to you. So,
You get that little platform, you get a little drunk on like, oh, people are going to listen to this shit. And so yeah, I think he
mhm.
and I Madam Psychosis is like, I don't know, it's almost even like a commentary on just like the loneliness of, you're trying to create something, but she's also trying to hide behind, and it's interesting, like behind an audio format,
Mhm.
to make this commentary about the being veiled, being hidden, trying to like maintain some sort of anonymity even while she was like descending into her crack use.
Mhm. And there's also, I'm sure there's something in there about hiding yourself from the world while simultaneously broadcasting yourself to the world as well.
Yep.
So how did you discover the book in the first? Well, what is like your literary background? Are you like you just read a few things and this book got you out of nowhere, or are you a voracious reader and this is one of many things that are in your worldview?
uh I hope to imagine myself as the latter.
Hmm.
I would pinpoint the moment that literature really entered my life, and as a musician, you might appreciate this. I checked out of the local library when I was a kid the Crash Test Dummies album with that terrible like low voice song. But one of the lines in it was about measuring afternoons in coffee spoons, and my mom heard me listening to it, and I was in like second grade, and she checked out T.S. Eliot for me from the library and like made me read the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock.
Okay, that is a good literary mom right there.
Oh yeah,
I
I'll,
think
I'll give
we
her.
I think we need to stop right now and give a shout out to all the literary moms, because it's something I literally did not think about it until you mentioned it, but it's those kind of like on the ball moms that are like, "Oh, I recognize that lyric from something. You should read this." Because
Yeah,
otherwise that would have flitted right by you and who knows what would have happened.
exactly. And I'm like what, 8 or 9, and my mom is like, "Here, read some T.S. Eliot." But it was after that I just read everything I could. I loved Tolkien. When I got into
Mhm.
high school, I loved Dennis Johnson and Isabel Allende, and just read whatever really I could. And
Mhm.
when I got to college, and how I found Infinite Jest is I started uh, dating this woman my sophomore year of college, and she was leaps and bounds better read and smarter than I was, and she
Mhm.
actually told me to read the book. So it's kind of the opposite of the cultural ideas around this book of douchey dudes recommending it to their
Mhm.
girlfriends. My girlfriend recommended to me, and the first time I read it, I hated it.
Yeah, those lit girls always shoving David
uh,
Foster Wallace down. You just don't understand it yet. Read it a fourth time. Sorry. So you didn't like it at first?
I didn't. I actually I remember it really clearly. I read pretty much the whole thing um, in about 3 weeks, and I was in actually Wenham, Massachusetts, which is a suburb of Boston. And I just sat down and read the whole dang thing. I was like, I'm gonna just force myself to get through this book.
Mm-hmm.
And to echo all of the annoying cliches about this book out there, like I finished it and I was like, shit, I have to read this book again. Just to even like understand it. Like I had always been attracted to more like even Dennis Johnson has really simple language, and Hemingway, like I loved kind of that more like gut punch kind of literature.
Mm-hmm.
And with this being so freaking vast, I was pissed that I had to read it again. But I did.
You were intrigued enough that you felt the need to.
I was, and then over the years, I have read this book now 6 times, cover to cover, and a big part of that for me was that I got sober in 2015, and through the process of that, it just kept popping up into my head about like this book gave me such great context while I was like hating AA and trying to get my shit together, and it really changed my recovery at that point. It was this great kind of comfortable thing. It was like a meeting without having to go to a meeting.
It must give you an interesting frame of reference for, well, that I'm putting this to you, but really I'm talking about myself. It gives an interesting frame of reference because even somebody like me who, like I said, I've had family in the program that where it's just on the peripheral, it did kind of like solidify a lot of the stuff I saw there that now when I think, despite having been to actual AA meetings, I think of the book. Like I saw the crocodiles in person before I ever even thought of the crocodiles. And it took reading the book like, oh, those guys. Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah. And there's such a great kind of example of the crotchety old timer in AA who, I think it might even be mentioned in the book, but it's like, my experience with AA was like wanting to know how AA works. Like, how the fuck does this work? How is this going to get me sober? And these insufferable old guys looking you dead in the face, and they're like, it works just fine. And you're like, that's the worst cop out answer there is. And it was one of the recent episodes that you covered. It's like the cake analogy. Like if you just follow the fucking directions on the box of cake, you're going to end up with a cake.
Right.
And
a few generations of cake makers have solidified, have put this down so even a dummy like you can figure it out. Maybe quit questioning the cake makers, and before asking, well, how does this make a cake? How about you try it?
Exactly.
Nice. All right. Well, shit, that's interesting. You got a lot of stuff coming into this. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
So we can get into our notes for this week. We start on probably the worst thing I've read in the book so far.
Yep.
Okay. So again, for those listening, we are doing 682 to 716. We're opening on November 14th, year of the dependent adult undergarment. We meet Maddie Pemulis, who isn't stated outrightly, but I can assume is the brother of Michael.
Yep.
He is at a Portuguese restaurant in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He is 23 years old and a prostitute. His father, who often told him to wipe that smile off his face, died when he was 17 of a pancreatic thing. Out the window, he sees various people, including a terrible-looking poor Tony Krause, noticeable only for his trademark boa and red leather coat. David drops very bluntly that Maddie's dad began anally raping him when he was 10. I might put some fun music behind this to try and going up the country, baby, don't you wanna come? While some people's psyches are merciful enough to let them block out familial sexual assault, Maddie remembers them vividly with the disgusting quote, he remembered every inch and pimple of every single time. Gross. Strange caresses from father to son that were just imperceptibly over the line for a large drunken Irish father. I feel terrible that I can actually relate in the most innocent of ways, because I had my own drunken Irish dad who I remember would tousle my hair, but had kind of, let's say he had the strength of a certain kind of people we're not allowed to say anymore. And Lenny from Mice and Men might be a good one. To this day, I do not like my hair being tousled or my shoulders being rubbed, because I just remember my dumb Irish dad like crushing my 6-year-old shoulders. Like, that feels good, right? I saw this on TV once.
Yeah, I mean, this section is grim.
Yeah.
And it gives one of the things that I really love about that's a rough word to use. One of the things
No, you were saying the thing you love about anal raping children. Continue.
Is the way that David Foster Wallace, like, he puts these words in the Pemulis Daz mouth about like not even being able to admit that what he's doing is awful. Like he starts accusing Maddie of like, what do you want to call me? And he never used the word like, homosexual or.
Yeah, we know what you're going for.
Exactly. And it's, overall, this section, just in retrospect, like when you look back about Mike, like curled up facing the wall, being in the room for this over and over and over and over, like puts Pemulis in this whole new kind of characterization that makes him a lot more, I don't know, it makes him really complex, and it makes him an interesting foil to the Incandenza family, where Averill is probably the issue.
Right, and also a major helicopter parent. It would be easy up until this context to consider Pemulis just like smart alecky dickhead street smart kid. It's kind of it's like that thing you only learn when you get older, that like the bully at school who's like very physical, like maybe it's not a great idea to fight him back, because if he's fighting everybody at school, there's a very good chance he's gotten used to dodging a grown man's fists.
Exactly.
And that's the real background of that. And yeah, that is, it's crazy how he does that delusional, like psychological pirouette into being okay with, like, it would be humorous almost if it was anything else. Like if he had a sweet tooth and like, oh, so you're looking, well, if I'm such a big sweet tooth, I guess I'll just eat all this cake then. Except the cake is fucking his son. And oh God.
I know. And it's, in the kind of in like you pointed out at the beginning, Matt remembers all of this. He doesn't suppress any of this. Like it's all out on the table. And despite everything and despite the really fucking grim details, like he's presented as someone who actually kind of has his shit together in a way. At least psychically, where he's not escaping into his substance, and he's actually observing poor Tony through the window, who is just like in literal flight from his addiction.
Right. So yeah, I'm curious what we're going to see more of him. Yeah, I have more notes here, but honestly, that we've pretty much gotten it. We don't need the details of the petroleum jelly and
we don't need to go into the. It's an interesting sentence though, where he calls it the stone in pond plop of a Vaseline cap, which is just it's good writing in a fucking cringeworthy way.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you can hear the actual sound in your head, because I think everybody knows what that sounds like, and just in a little, like, no, thank you.
Yep.
Pemulis later died choking on aspirated blood, a fountain of dark blood that stained everything about it. Maddie held his father's yellowed wrist while his mother ran for help. He still drinks a toast to his father's memory on his first shot. And whoever is writing the footnotes wonders aloud where Mrs. Pemulis was during these late night activities. Yeah, I don't know if my audience is particular to nu metal, but if you really want to ruin your day, go listen to the song Daddy off of Korn's first album. which is pretty much this. So if children being raped wasn't enough for you, let's put a catchy tune behind it.
I've been loving your comparison of David Foster Wallace's writing to prog rock, like fucking just showing off. And so we'll just call this the new metal section.
There you go. Yeah, this is the David Foster Wallace, the new metal years. Oh, God. It just shows my own weird frame of reference. So, okay, I'm going to give something weird to the crowd here, but whatever, it's interesting. So the thing about aspirating blood, I've seen this. There used to be a Reddit called a Reddit sub called Watch People Die. Gonna be honest, people, I've checked it out. I have my own horrible fear of death, and just like a lot of anxious people, you just feel like if I do enough research, I'll be ready when it comes for me. But I remember there was a particular video of like a Chinese bus driver, and what happens is these people, they get so fucked up that they break, and an aneurysm happens like in their aorta, bleeds out into their esophagus, and they literally just like high propulsion jet stream blood everywhere, and it's considered one of the worst ways to die, and it's fucking bonkers. And I think this is, I might have actually brought this up. I think Pemulis maybe dropped something earlier that this is how his dad died, because I think this isn't the first time I brought this up.
It's not, and it's actually, I believe it's Gately's mom.
That's it.
Gately's
okay,
mom.
I knew it came up somewhere else, but yeah, horrifying way to die. Maybe don't Google it. Maybe do Google it. Whatever helps you sleep a little better at night. Okay, November 11th. You're the dependent adult undergarment. We are back at Enfield. First thing after supper, Hal drops in on Schtitt to discuss several things regarding his earlier exhibition with Tice. What went wrong? Why set this up so publicly, so close to the Whataburger tournaments? He finds only a shirtless Delint in the office going over charts and notes from the match. Neither mention the presence of Steepley during the game. Hal retreats to the viewing room where he watches several of his father's avant-garde film cartridges, where we will spend a lot of this episode. Anyone viewing this scene would assume Hal is depressed. He watches half of Medusa versus Odalisque before he turns it off when the audience starts turning to stone. He watches Wave Bye-Bye to the Bureaucrat, which I think this might be as in-depth a description as we get of any of James's films, where we get like the actual beat by beat. So a bureaucrat whose work is great, but his chronic lateness is an insult to bureaucracy, is threatened with termination if he's late again. So the bureaucrat and his wife gather every alarm clock in the house, only to have a power outage, and he's late anyway. As somebody who is chronically late, I know this struggle so much.
Oh yeah, the setting every single alarm clock that you possibly can to try to make sure that you're gonna make it.
Setting 6 alarms on your phone 3 minutes apart. Yep. The only good thing about COVID and losing my job has been like, oh, this is what it's like to actually get enough sleep every night. I never knew this. Okay, he rushes. Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was gonna hop in. I mean, it's this whole first part of this section we're going through today. Is this like obsession with time almost, where even at the beginning of the Matt Pemulis part, he describes Tony Krause as never so much walking as making an infinite series of grand entrances into pocket after pocket of space or time, like this grand entrance. And then when we get to Hal, Delint tells him, you just never occurred out, freaks him out, like he doesn't even exist. And then we go straight into this long description of this film where like the only way that this bureaucrat can define his like kind of worth at the beginning is his job performance and being on time, and like having that just explode. Like all of this is like about things falling apart, for lack of a better description.
Well, not to mention, even we permanently associate poor Tony with time traveling in his own way too, because that's what it was so visually described as, his entire kicking in the bathroom stall.
Exactly.
So he rushes maddeningly to try to make the last possible train to make it in time. He jumps down the steps and collides with a child in glasses and bow tie. Hal recognized the kid from another film as well, and it is severely distressing to him that he can't remember the kid's name. Surely a side effect of never being sober for longer than 24 hours in over a year. The bureaucrat is torn between catching the train on time and helping the kid up and picking up his packages. After an internal moment of conflict, he helps the kid and leaves the train without him, leading to the child to ask as he walks away, "Mister, are you Jesus?" To which the bureaucrat responds, "Don't I wish?" He walks away as the child waves at him. This is Mario's favorite of himself's films for its blatant earnestness. Hal tells Mario it's sentimental goo, but Hal secretly likes it as well.
No, and this is like, you've covered it on the podcast already, but David Foster Wallace, like, really wanting to be earnest and trying to get away from irony, and this film is, as Hal would describe it, is just sentimental goo. But Hal is, Hal's struggling and he secretly likes it, and Mario, who's sort of just this like pure watcher, is, he's unafraid to say that this is one of his dad's favorite films, or it's what, like, he just loves it. And I think that that's really important to kind of get away from, even though that this whole section is written in this really kind of ironic and erudite way, at the end it's like summed up by like, well, but they both really secretly like the fact that it's got this gooey sentimental ending.
Well, there also might be a bit to it, which is, you know what? I'll actually jump ahead and talk about that just because it's not really specific to. Actually, never mind. It's further along. Point is, at some point, we're going to get deeper into the idea that like art is made by these world weary people, but then it's picked up by children who are also trying to, like, they're just trying to figure out what's cool. So they have none of the experience of world weariness, but they interpret it as hip, so they go for that. And I do think there's some truth to the notion that even though, like, I mean, the oldest advice you would give a teenager to being cool is to like not care and seem unaffected, but the truth behind everything is we really are feeling everything. And maybe that's where, I don't know, there's a lot of stuff in there.
Yep.
Yeah. Hal watches a few more cartridges, including a posthumous film we will spend more time with later, Blood Sister, One Tough Nun, which Hal is unaware the idea came from himself's one attempt with Boston AA for 2 months before being turned off by the God Stuff and the Dogma. Yeah, I still haven't done it yet, but I might write a Blood Sister song today. I don't know. We will see.
I support that. That would be an epic song.
Well, I guess I have to do it now. All right.
You can just edit that out.
No, it's fine. One of the only things that keep me sane is I keep the editing of this podcast down to a bare minimum, just because I'm literally the only person involved that does anything with this. So the less work I make for myself, the better. Okay, November 14th, year-dependent adult undergarment. Poor Tony Krause awakens from his bus seizure in an ambulance. Since Tony has no health insurance, the doctors don't mind at all when he decides to up and leave as soon as he can. Poor Tony feels great, as one tends to feel post-seizure. He doesn't really dwell on it too much, but particularly in these modern times where we're discussing health insurance and the pros and cons all the time, I do love that he kind of puts it that everybody knows, like, sir, you're not ready. You're not healthy yet. Please, everybody's seen the action movie where the guy's like ripping the things off, like I got to go get Mendoza or whatever. But now here's this guy who has, transvestite, drug addict, no health insurance, and he's doing the same thing. They're like, yeah, no, well, okay, you know your body best. Go ahead.
Yeah, via con Dios, you're good.
We're not getting paid for this one. Tony and other ladies did work for the Antitois brothers. They had to wear identical red leather coats and auburn wigs and high heels and hang around a hotel in Harvard Square, while a man in the same outfit ran inside and threw foul-smelling liquid on ONAN politicians and allow him to slip away amongst the doppelgangers. So we get a lot of information in that. First off, we find out that Tony's trademark leather coat and wig and high heels is actually from a costume he was given along with several other people. And I do like this kind of payoff as when we first get the description of the Antitois brothers, they're like, they're technically terrorists, but really they're nuisances at best.
Yep.
And the major Quebecois are like, why are you wasting your fucking time on this? So to see that, like, yeah, let's hide amongst transvestites and throw like stink bombs at people, basically.
I mean, all of these little sort of like political breadcrumbs that we get along the way are so interesting, because like it gives us a little more context on the Antitois brothers, and you know, the sort of intersection of like this addiction world, like this drug crew, and the politics of it. And it kind of like harkens back to the time where the Antitois brothers weren't untethered from you know, their sort of handler, their terrorist handler, which again, I don't want to like throw spoilers out there, but
well, no, I think we know at this point that it's the Canadian VIP.
Okay, yeah, Duplessis, the guy that Gately actually you know, smothers, and so you start to get all this, like, all of these threads are beginning to come together, and a little more context of like the weirdness of this Canadian insurgency.
Yeah, we're definitely starting to see more and more of the ties that bind everyone together. As it's almost like a cat's cradle thing. It's like pulling the stitching in, and it's pretty cool, I'll be honest. So Tony is tempted by multiple women walking in front of him with spaghetti strap purses. He wants to steal one and sell it to the Antitois brothers rather than just beg for charity. So, next little section here. Jeffrey Day, we're back at Ennet. It infuriates me that he named the two places Enfield and Ennet so similarly. Jeffrey Day notes how the men of Ennet tend to have names for their genitals. Lenz calls it the Frightful Hog. Glynns is Poor Richard. This might be a class thing. Neither Day nor Yule nor Erdity have these names. Okay, I don't know. I remember being a teenager. I don't remember the name, but I remember we had names. It's a thing that happens at a point.
You know, it is a thing. I didn't mention in the intro, but I studied linguistics in college, and I actually took a class on gender and language. And there have been like whole studies about nicknames or slang in reference to genitalia, and how, like, if you look at like the men's list of you know, Johnson unit, all of the things that are you know, are constantly in this book, compared to the number of slang terms for female genitalia, and it's like, you know, the men's list is hundreds and hundreds of terms, and the women's list, and usually pretty grim and violent, to be totally honest. And yeah, and it's like it highlights this fact that, you know, and you've even talked about this book in terms of, like, you know, the Me Too movement and the problematic aspects of David Foster Wallace, and it's almost like he's obliquely addressing the fact that even our language is racist, is misogynistic, and we actually get a little bit of that later in our section. But like the trickiness of language and description, and how that can, you know, change the way that we understand things. And this is the first time in the book, and I think maybe the last time in the book, where you might actually, you know, one might have a bit of empathy for Jeffrey Day, because other than this, he's freaking insufferable.
Yes, he is. You know, that's a funny thing to think of. I never really considered the fact that women just don't have as much slang for their own genitals, but I think that just goes to how much is, I mean, not only just physically, it's mostly hidden away, but I've heard from like so many women in my life, not like family or anything, but just like girls, just like, oh yeah, I had no idea there was like, I thought there was a little hole for peeing, and like the fact that you wouldn't even know your own equipment. And I can understand how that would lead to, like, I remember there was one girl that called it a quiver, which was just, I mean, it's accurate, I guess, but Really not nice. I remember one particular girl referred to it as her bunny, which was okay. Maybe it's part of the reason I have bunny rabbits to this day. I don't know. But
We could get Freudian on this if we really want to.
I just like to nuzzle a bunny to my face every now and again and tell it how much I love it and kiss it sweetly. Okay. Lenz's penis has been brandished at other, and I just love the word brandished for a penis. Brandished at other Ennet members to make a point. Several shades darker than his skin, and a victim of the Polish curse, aka a chode, short and thick. Yeah, as somebody who is Polish and has gotten some kielbasa this week, I will say no more than that. Day is noting all this because Lenz has been discharged from Ennet, and Day finds himself missing the old scumbag now that he's stuck with uber boring Yule as a roommate instead. So I feel like that whole section is really just to tell us that Lenz is gone.
Yes, that he has been invited to ingest substances elsewhere.
Fucking Lenz. Okay, so this is what I hit on a little bit before. We get in a weird discussion of depression and the different levels, initially in relation to Gompert. Low depression is called enhedonia, which I guess will be our word of the week, aka simple melancholy, the loss of pleasure in formerly pleasurable things. This is the bowler who sells his ball and stays home, the musician that sells their guitar. Specifically, I had a friend who his big thing was he just loved going to live events, whether it be like movies or concerts or whatever. And when he got in big depressions, the hint was always he would be trying to sell these tickets for things that were months away just because he could not imagine giving a fuck about them. And, not like it matters.
Yep. When everything that you come to enjoy becomes rote and meaningless and boring.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you touched on this. This is like the discussion of art being like we I guess we emulate this really hip art that sometimes tends to be, I no offense to any Radiohead fans out there, but this is like my generation that grew up on Radiohead is like, it's like that I have to be too cool, even though some of it is kind of insufferable and erudite and boring. And yeah, I mean, it's like we learn this affect to just be like, nothing matters, man. And we might as well just embrace the weirdness of it and be down about it. And I think that that's like a really interesting commentary, especially from just about the art of the time. Was like, we're trying to be so self-referential and smart about everything that we lose the like emotional impact that art can actually have.
Yeah, there's a few things there, particularly when it comes to I feel like there is a lot of art telling us how to feel. Like I mentioned Korn earlier in there. I was 13 when Korn really broke, so I was like exactly their demographic. But honestly, looking back now, I'm a little indignant that was kind of. I hate to be like an old fuddy-duddy, think of the children, but like I was kind of sold sadness porn at the time I was most vulnerable to it. Like, fucking Papa Roach, don't give a fuck if I cut my arm bleeding. Like, dude, you're almost 30 and teenagers are going to cut themselves because they think this is what cool guys are supposed to do. Like, that's a little fucking gross.
Yeah, I mean, I think back, that was my high school years. It was Korn and Linkin Park and Papa Roach and moving into like Thursday and Taking Back Sunday and like the quote unquote emo scene. And yeah, we were raised on this like sadness porn.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you can scream about it and it's cool and it's so grim.
Yeah, I feel like some of it I still like. I like Thursday. Despite being a metalhead, I loved My Chemical Romance from Jump. Just because, and I remember my friends like, they're just ripping off Queen. Like, yeah, nobody really ripped off Queen, and more bands should have, like that big operatic shit. But like, they always had like an optimism to their music. Compare that to somebody like Hawthorne Heights, where it was literally to cut my wrists and black my eyes. Like, dude, you're supposed to be subtle with this, for God's sake. And I remember a comedian I love, Kurt Metzger, was talking about how you don't realize that so much of this stuff that's out in the world is made by like super rich New York City kids with super rich parents who they're world weary because like they've done everything. These are like New York City people. When you're like born and raised there, these are like the rich kids who get over a coke problem when they're 14. You know, he describes them as like vampires. They're like these small children, but they can't drive or swim somehow. But you know, we're actually putting the cart ahead of the horse here because this comes.
Oh, we might have jumped ahead.
Gompert feels it at emotions stripped to abstracts. You know what happiness is, but you can't feel it in any palpable way. Everything becomes an outline. In Boston AA, the terms inability to identify. Younger Enfield kids attribute JOI's suicide to anhedonia, which tends to affect otherwise well-accomplished people. Pardon me. This is inaccurate and indicative of a problem with the kids themselves. The fact that achievement doesn't equal happiness is still alien and abstract to them at this age. I love this line he puts here that they imagine the number 2 ranked in their division feels precisely double as good as the kid ranked at number 4, which is it's a very childish but very accurate notion. When you're a little kid, you think like, yeah, that the person everybody is paying attention to must feel great all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that idea of value, like where do I rank? And if I rank high enough, I'm going to be that much happier. And I mean, and this whole section is about like when you get to that, you know, your achievement level, that plateau, there's absolutely no guarantee that you're going to feel any different. From the outside, it might look different, but you know, that feeling on the inside, which he really dives into in this section about like what depression and anhedonia can feel like, that, you know, we have this disconnect with like what people perceive from the outside and what we're feeling on the inside, which is, I think, why in this section, there's such a focus on describing the films, because film and its very nature can only be in this like outside observation. And so diving into these outside observations to try to get to some sort of internal feeling is like the dilemma, the double bind in James trying to express emotions by just documenting and looking at things.
Right. I left off a little note there. It's noted that lower ranked kids do tend to be happier, which does not surprise me even a little. Hal believes he is empty, and his major skill is convincing everybody but himself there's actually a person living inside his head. Hal feels alone, which I like. I don't know if you're aware of this. I still look up on like 4chan every now and again, which I maintain is like just I want to see what the animals have to say right now, like the racist 12-year-olds just shouting the N-word into the ether. But there is a concept that's going around that I don't know how seriously anybody takes it, but they refer to it as a NPC theory. So NPC is a video game term. It means non-playable character. So literally just somebody you interact with, but like they have no agency or whatever. But one of the theories that these people have that kind of shows just how isolated they are is some of them actually try to divide religion into it. But the religious one, okay, I'll go with the religious term because it makes more sense. There's so many people in the world. There can't be this many souls going around. So like 50% of people you meet, there's actually nobody inside them. Like there's nobody manning the ship. They are a non-playable character. And I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, it kind of goes back to like Vonnegut with Breakfast of Champions. Everybody's a robot but him.
Yep. So. No, and you'll again, we're jumping ahead in the book a little bit. You'll get to it. That actually is a really big concern in kind of the last part of Infinite Jest. Yeah. And there's actually this long description of James making these films where, you know, he's talking about like Cheers and like the fact that the other people at the bar are there and they're having conversations and like they don't matter at all. And he started making these films where he gave equal audio to every single person on the soundstage, and they were just insufferable because it's just like, it's just like a film of like a noisy bar.
Mm-hmm.
And even at Ennet, there's a scene where one of the people who hang around there is trying to describe that there are only 7 real people in the world, and everything else is like the fucking Matrix. Like
Right.
like that idea that we are or can perceive other people as 100% robotic, and like
Mm-hmm.
just their outsides.
Right. And that goes all the way back to just the problem of consciousness in general is we cannot know other minds. Like I know what red looks like to me, but I cannot be certain that red looks the same to anybody else. And that I mean, that's a big part of the thing that makes us feel alone in the first place, is that Dave Foster Wallace actually says it in This Is Water, and I think it's great. It's like my entire body is wired to tell me I am the exact center of the universe. That's what existence is.
Yep.
Okay, so this gets into pretty much what we've talked about already. Very, very 90s discussion, like grunge era idea, romanticized as the German word Weltschmerz, which I guess is another word of the week. Try to use it in a sentence. Weltschmerz, hip world weariness. The classic 90s Kurt Cobain, it's all bullshit, man, from a man you consider to be a wizened, grizzled guru, as opposed to a junkie who has never enjoyed anything in life. I think that might be my own note. I didn't italicize it like I typically do, but the art is made by older, world-weary people and consumed by younger people who use it to determine what is hip and what is cool and then affect it. To be cool is to be unalone. Hal theorizes this hatred of sentiment is a fear of really being human. To be open and sincere and earnest and to feel is to make oneself a gooey, whimpering baby. I've actually thought about, well, hold on, I'll give the little description. In JOI's American History Through the Lens of a Brick, there's a shot of a piano string that is muted by a thumb. Later, the thumb is removed and the string rings out, only to become louder and somehow rotten to the point that it sounds like a note begging to be thumbed out again. Yeah, a little
just a quick little dive in. That thumb is, if I'm remembering correctly, that's the first appearance of Joelle in any James film. It's her thumb that pushes down on the string.
Interesting. Hidden from day one. Nice. Yeah, so one of the things I really like about that is, I remember reading, and this is something I've given a lot of thoughts to when I become a father, if I have a son, just because my dad was extremely masculine and wanted me to be extremely masculine, despite the fact that I took after my mother emotionally and not him. And that caused some trouble. But I remember I read something once, and I feel like this would be an important thing to teach kids at a young age, where like boys are taught that crying is such a bad thing. If you go back and read like old folklore like Beowulf and shit like that, apparently there's like stuff with the protagonist crying all the time, and that being like an old symbol of like manhood and masculinity, that he cares so much about this plight that it has infected him personally. And I don't know, I feel like you wonder how much of this, because it could seem like to be world weary and unaffected, is kind of a defense mechanism that like maybe is good to human survival for all we know. But then you hear something like that and like, okay, maybe that wasn't always the case. You never know if you're feeling something because this is human nature or it's because of this particular blip of where you are in history.
And I don't know if we can know. And that's one of the big themes here is like, and it goes back to that This Is Water thing. Like all we really have is this like literally self-centered experience of reality. Mm-hmm. And when we're raised in this way, I mean, that's one of the things that you hear over and over and over in recovery is like, you can cry, you can show your emotions, because I think that addiction is so like inextricably tied up with that desire to appear okay. Like I got my shit under control. I got this. Where
not only that, but a lot of that can come from childhood, where like, if things aren't okay, where like just lying to yourself and saying it's okay is the only thing that keeps you not terrified.
Exactly. And that's like the double bind of addiction for so many people is like, yeah, substances were fun and they were the fucking solution until they're not.
Right.
And like, and once they're not, then you're at that jumping off place as
Zell Irwin come in and plop down. Hal complains he came here to be alone. They retort that a public common room without locks isn't a great place to do that. Some more girls stick their head in and mention to Hal there's a gigantic woman in the hall looking for him. So very, very abrupt perspective change where we just pull right back to Hal after all this being set up with Maddie and poor Tony and now Gompert and Cleve walking somewhere.
Yep. And it's one of those sections he's really starting to pull all of these sort of pieces into the narrative. So like we're getting kids from the tennis academy. We're getting Lyle. We're getting this view of Ennett House, residents walking down the street, and they're all breadcrumbs. Like by the fourth or fifth time that I went through this, like when you have these breakups of these like really distinct sections, it's like, this is important. Like here are 5 things that you need to know for this time right now. And, and I would say that the one with Avril trying to get a hold of, quote unquote, Helen Steepley's, journalistic office in Arizona, to kind of like figure out who this person is. And, this like that, I think is like really trying to like piece together plot of this novel.
Mm-hmm.
Like Avril's kind of momentum here is indicative of what's going to happen in the last 250 or so pages.
Okay. Yeah, we're definitely feeling people come together. Even this is like the second or third time we've known these people were existing in pretty close geographical proximity, but this is the second or third time now where Wallace has explicitly stopped and been like, here is where everybody is at in this exact moment, which is also important considering how much the timeline jumps around in this. Like, I think I didn't realize until a bit in that literally like almost every time we saw Steepley and Moraith in Tucson, we were jumping back several months and viewing them all over the course of like a night. But I do love just the scene here of the fact that Hal wants to be alone and comically more and more people just wander into the room with him.
And he's just sitting there like trying to be as disgusting as possible with this huge plug of Kodiak in his cheek, like spitting into a trash can, and everyone's just like, yeah, whatever.
Hal thinks of the film Blood Nun, one of James's only profitable mainstream films. Turns out he made a few of these. When abstractness didn't scratch his itch, he leaned extreme and over-the-top parody. The best being The Knight Wears a Sombrero. A footnote tells us it was an actual exercise in self-hate that James made regarding his failures at sponsorship and spirituality at Boston AA. More and more students sit down to the point that everyone but Hal is 100% absorbed in the film. So the film is about a tough biker chick saved by a brutal beating and raping by a nun who was also a biker chick. She herself then goes on a search to save a street girl like herself, finding a punk rock girl covered in burns, possibly from a freebase explosion. We see the punk rock girl go from drug addict rebel to true friend and reading scripture. Bridget Boone notes that there might be an allegory of a girl exchanging one habit, quote, for another habit, quote, the nuns. Hal barely pays attention, thinking instead of a different himself film where female executives dominate the male ones. The public considered it a lampoon when in fact it was a deeply depressive episode where James had changed careers and was feeling anhedonic and took a year off to drink wild turkey and watch trash TV for a year. This was the period of time where he met Lyle.
So this is a great little throwaway that matters.
Okay.
So when you if you go back to EndNote 24, which is the insufferably long filmography of all of the films, and you look up Low Temperature Civics, the description of the film, and this one also stars Madam Psychosis, and it's described as a Wyler parody in which four sons, and then he lists the actors, intrigue for control of a sandwich bag conglomerate, which is a total throwaway joke to the Year of Glad, after their CEO father has an ecstatic encounter with death, played by Madam Psychosis, and becomes irreversibly catatonic. And so it's like, it's this throwaway where it really does position Joelle or Madam Psychosis as like this figure of death that can literally make you catatonic. And so it's this little breadcrumb to lead us to what the actual entertainment, what the Samizdat is doing to people as this is going on.
Right. It's definitely an allusion to that. I mean, we know that she appears in the Infinite Jest film, The Entertainment, but obviously there's been a lot set up of just how hard it is to look away from her and how entrancing she is. I do love the detail that Hal keeps going on what the public thought of the film, and it seems like all the films, like, actually it was his disappointment at himself not being able to, move ahead in life, and that seems to be the inspiration for all of his films. Is like he kind of hated himself, and that's what this was.
Yep.
Joelle Van Dyne is starting to ID more with speakers. She just attended a Cocaine Anonymous meeting, which are not terribly popular due to their niche drug, but she went because it was in the same hospital where she just visited Gately. He is unconscious in the trauma wing, not doing well. Joella is struggling with feelings for him, as all AA groups insist to avoid relationships for the first year of sobriety. That quitting drugs is supposed to tear out a hole in your psyche, which should be filled with your higher power and not a relationship. A common idiom is, addicts don't have relationships, they take hostages. Ain't that the goddamn truth? We mentioned it before. That's the 13th step, dating somebody in AA.
Exactly.
The
No,
speaker. Go ahead.
One of your previous guests actually mentioned this scene, like the peanut butter scene. And this speaker's story about like, riding the missile off into paycheck devastation and financial ruin and family falling apart, and like coming back to his apartment and finding this like scraped out thing of peanut butter, and just how tragic this story is. And this little narrative in here is like, it just cuts me. Like, we've talked about the gut punches, and this is one of them for me, where it's like these people, and it also has the optimism of like AA and NA and CA and all of these fellowships, like, are able to bring some of these people who seem like they are, never going to make it, and then and bring them to some semblance of like being able to help.
Right. Okay. So yeah, the speaker gives his rock bottom, did a lot of cocaine, though his wife and daughter suffered for it. His wife would come meet him on payday at the check cashing place to make sure he didn't spend his check on coke. This is actually a very similar story that my grandmother would tell me about her mother sending her to grab her father's paychecks so he wouldn't spend it all at the bar. That's right. Runs in the family. He decided to just buy a small amount of coke to get him by and spend the rest on rent and groceries. Sure, that always works out. Just a pinch. Just a pinch to keep me, not trying to get fucked up, just get a little loose. Instead, he got caught up with friends and blew all the money till there was none left. Came home to a final notice rent slip from the Boston Housing Authority and saw the empty peanut butter and realized just how low he had driven his family to go, that this was all the food they had. So he left home and went to a shelter and demanded a meeting at Cocaine Anonymous, and he's now been clean for 224 days. The irony of his first day at the shelter was the only food was the same peanut butter his wife and daughter had to subsist on. Joel feels...
That's how we found higher power.
There you go. Joelle feels moved and feels the first genuine urges to stay clean forever. She wants to stay straight, whether Gately ends up back on Demerol or rejects her or gets mad he can't see her face. Joelle notes this is the first time she considered possibly wanting to show her face to anyone. The date is November 14th. So, yeah, a lot of exposition there. I'm very curious what happens with Joelle and Gately. We get another instance where, like, one character's motivation is kind of being expressed by another, where by watching this person, she's finally feeling she's IDing, and now she's like, I think I do actually just want to stay clean forever, which I get that from some people, because like even the few things I've had to quit, it's always been like, I'm sure I'll probably be the guy though. I'll still need one or two every now and again. I can't imagine not doing it forever. And that first time where you're like, actually, I think I'm done with this is mind-blowing.
Yep. No, and this just to harken back where we started, the end note in this section where they talk about, because over and over they refer, through Joelle's eyes, she refers to this speaker as colored. And it has like this really kind of problematic language. And it's almost the first time where like David Foster Wallace really addresses that overtly, where he's like, oh, by the way, the language that I'm using in this section is through Joelle's eyes, which is problematic, but she is the paragon of racial sensitivity in comparison to Gately. And it kind of harkens back to some of those instances of really terrible language that we've had to deal with in this book.
Yeah, and it's easier doing it with her where obviously where Gately is just straight up using the N-word, but Joelle, it's more like a term that has fallen out of fashion. So it doesn't have quite the I feel like the N-word thing is a little bit like getting punched in the nose. Like it's the only thing you can see because it packs that big a punch. Whereas colored, you're kind of like, yeah, okay, we can get around. They're trying.
They're trying.
Know where their heart is. Okay, to wrap it up here, we are back to One Tough Nun. The young punk girl is found dead. One tough nun goes on a rampage, certain the street thugs she escaped got to her, and destroys them all with nun aikido. Only to make a shocking revelation, dun dun dun, it was the Mother Superior that killed her. there's a whole thing. It's a little bit of the Marathan Steepley, like, is he a triple agent or a quadruple agent? Like, does he know that I know that he knows that I know that he knows he's only trying to trick me into thinking he's doing this? Wherein how the Mother Superior killing this girl undoes the whole chain of command where one tough nun was trying to fulfill. She wanted to repay the older nun who saved her by saving another, but now that the nun who saved her turned out evil, yada yada yada, we get it. This culminates in good.
I know the hilarious part about this is like it really is this it's like this spiral of writing, but it is this critique of like the ideas that we have about 12-step recovery. Like the only thing that you can do to deserve the thing you've gotten is pass it on. But what happens if the person who gave it to you fucks up? And like so many new people in recovery, like that's the big worry. Like this isn't going to work because it's such a tenuous chain of quote unquote savedness. And I love that it's this like really complex spiral like writing that when you really boil it down, it's just like, get over it. Like if you're saved, you're saved.
Right. Yeah. There does seem to be, I notice with things like that, it's a lot of people getting tied up in the purity of a thing. I personally think one of the best revelations you can have as a young person is no matter how good things are, something dirty probably had to happen to get you there. Like nothing's pure. Trying to think of a direct example of this. I just remember a dumb one. I remember I was like a teenager and I called my girlfriend, and my brother, who was younger than me, started giving me shit like, you use this like high-pitched voice with her, like, oh hi, like, that's not really, why are you being so phony? And it's like, well, because it would be a little bit fucked up if I talked to this girl that I was having affection with, like I talk like, hey, what's up, baby, you want to fuck later? Like it's not dishonesty. This is how life is. It's the phony bullshit of like Holden Caulfield and all that, where, you know, just they're all a bunch of phonies. Like you're the only one obsessed with this dude, and you're very alone and not having a good time. Maybe take a note.
Yep.
Where are we? Okay. This culminates in the nuns having been running a drug ring from the rectory, and one tough nun getting the shit kicked out of her by all the nuns, including the one that saved her, only for that nun to come to her senses just before one tough nun is decapitated by the Mother Superior, bashing Mother Supes with a crucifix. She squares up with the Mother Superior before just dropping the hatchet, leaving, buying a motorcycle, and riding off into the night. I'm very curious if David Foster Wallace lived long enough to see the film Grindhouse, because this does kind of feel a little bit like the machete over the topness of the whole thing.
It's funny because he actually in this book he refers to at several points he refers to Tarantino and like not liking the, what does he call him, a schlockmeister, like a gory film. And you know, the film that I kept thinking of when I'm reading this description is Boondock Saints. Like this over the top choreographed ridiculous action movie with just this like punch you in the forehead symbology attached to it. And you know, and it's a I'm losing my train of thought, but it is this critique of like, what is the value in our entertainment, and does it have to have this like multi-tiered sense of meaning, or can we just have something where a whole bunch of shit blows up and enjoy the entertainment aspect of that? And sometimes they can be both. And I think that's where, like, the whole time I'm reading this description, it literally like feels like a South Park cartoon to me. Like it's ridiculous. And then they move on to this like the Latin in it, contraria sunt complementa, the heaviness of which makes Hal cringe so severely it's Boone who has to supply the translation. And when you look it up, that just all that really means is like opposites are complementary. And again, I'm probably reading way too much into this, but that was the personal motto of Niels Bohr, who is one of the fathers of quantum mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's sort of like it's the David Foster Wallace like masturbatory intellectualism, to like have all these little references.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that especially with the obsession with time in all of this, like what time, even from the previous films, like that idea of like entanglement, and all of this stuff is entangled in kind of almost a quantum way. Is again, it's probably like overreading, but all of these things have like these little hooks that go out into other disciplines and other manners of thinking. So whether it's 12-step or film or the hard sciences, like all of it is getting fucking messy in literally like a
I look at like not everything needs to be like the main point. Like I'm a big fan of like peppering in little details like that just kind of they're like a garnish. Like it's nice to have there. Like I had oh God. So one of my other side ventures right now is I'm writing a weekly humorous wrestling recap for a company called AEW. And I noticed like I'm starting to slip Infinite Jest references into that. And the whole purpose is if nobody notices, then that's fine. But the one or two people who do understand that, it's going to blow their fucking minds. And that's what I love, those little details. Like, what did I think I put something Mexican and then I said North American and then I put ONAN something. I don't know. I'm hoping somehow tying Infinite Jest in with Lucha Libre is going to make somebody's day.
There's got to be a Venn diagram out there of, professional wrestling and Infinite Jest fans. There's got to be some sliver out there.
You would be surprised. I mean, so one of the ways I promote this podcast is I will literally just go on Twitter. I will look up recent mentions of Infinite Jest and I will just comment and link the podcast. And I found one recently where it was like a parody account of a famous wrestler, but he was talking about Infinite Jest. And I started talking with him. He's like, yeah, that's really fucking weird. I'm going to go look up everything you've ever made. Like, thank you.
There you go. You found your ideal audience.
Yes, exactly. All right. Well, those are my notes for this week. Thank you, Jeff. How are you feeling? You feeling good about this whole process?
Hell yeah, that was fun. Thanks for inviting some random dude from Colorado onto your podcast.
It's fun just shooting the shit and philosophizing about this. If we were sitting in, here's the thing: if we were having the same discussion in a coffee shop, we'd look like a couple of assholes. Instead, we're putting it out to the world, and I'm sure we still look a little bit like assholes, but it was fun.
Exactly.
This is the appropriate place for navel gazing and talking about 24-year-old books and time travel. Why not? So
you might as well throw a little corn in there too.
Exactly. Yes. Wrestling, literature, new metal. That's right. We did it all for the bookie. That was terrible, even for me. Jeff, tell us again where we can find you online.
Again, at Tall Hefe on Twitter, and that's about it.
All right. I'm going to put trademark pending for I did it all for the bookie, because I might that's a terrible name for a podcast and it might need to exist. So I'm going to look at that. Yep. Thanks for doing this. End it like we end every episode. I'm going to turn this off, but you and I can keep talking for a minute. Thanks, man. You've been a great guest.
Thanks, man.